Yeah, in the Senate, things are a little bit more smooth, I guess, generally speaking. And yeah, Biden has kind of forged, I guess you could say, some relative friendships over there. Notably, earlier this week, he was in Kentucky talking about a new bridge project going across the river, the Ohio River, that separates Kentucky from Ohio and the city of Cincinnati. And Mitch McConnell, the Republican, was in attendance, and Biden even was talked about Mitch McConnell and thanked him for being there, and even joked about how he could campaign for him or campaign against him, whichever one was better for Mitch.
Right.
But of course, on the House side, that's going to be different. That's where the shift has been. He's now dealing with a GOP majority in the House, and even though Republicans have a very, very narrow margin there, they are in the majority, and they're going to try to cause headaches for Biden as much as they can over the next 2 years.
Welcome to Reporter's Notebook, where we talk to the Washington Examiner's top journalists about the stories breaking on their beats. I'm Jim Antle, joined today by White House reporter Haiston Willis. Haiston, President Biden is dealing with a Republican majority on Capitol Hill for the first time of his presidency. Talk a little bit about some of the dynamics at play here. He's maybe found some friends in the one chamber that Democrats still hold.
He's maybe found some friends. What do you mean by that exactly?
Well, he has a very different relationship with Senate Republican leader Mitch McConnell than he really seems to have with any of the major players on the House Republican side.
Okay, I see what you're saying. Yes, of course. Yeah, in the Senate, things are a little bit more smooth, I guess, generally speaking. And yeah, Biden has kind of forged, I guess you could say, some relative friendships over there. Notably, earlier this week, he was in Kentucky talking about a new bridge project going across the river, the Ohio River, that separates Kentucky from Ohio and the city of Cincinnati. And Mitch McConnell, the Republican, was in attendance, and Biden even was talked about Mitch McConnell and thanked him for being there, and even joked about how he could campaign for him or campaign against him, whichever one was better for Mitch.
Right.
But of course, on the House side, that's going to be different. That's where the shift has been. He's now dealing with a GOP majority in the House, and even though Republicans have a very, very narrow margin there, they are in the majority, and they're going to try to cause headaches for Biden as much as they can over the next 2 years.
So the infrastructure bill built a bridge between President Biden and Mitch McConnell.
Yeah, you could say that, I guess so. And it's really interesting that okay, he was there, maybe that's not that big a deal, but one thing that kind of evidenced that was significant was that Rand Paul, Kentucky's other Republican senator, was not there, and
Right.
Ohio's new Republican senator, J.D. Vance, also wasn't there. So Mitch kind of went on a limb to actually show up and be there.
Right, although I believe Governor DeWine, the Republican governor of Ohio, Mike DeWine, was there as well. And he's viewed as somewhat more of a centrist Republican, centrish maybe.
Centrist, yeah, you
Yeah.
could say that, yeah.
Mm-hmm. So there are so for all the overtures President Biden might be making to the other party, or not making in some cases, there are some problems he has within his own party, which has kind of been a theme throughout his presidency, but this is a little bit different. He has an important Democratic mayor making some demands of him.
Yeah, right here in D.C. D.C. Mayor Muriel Bowser, she's just now beginning her third term in office, leading D.C. And they've had a really, really interesting relationship, more contentious than you would think, between a Democratic mayor of a very, very liberal D.C.
Right.
and a Democratic president. Of course, last year in 2022, immigrants started arriving in D.C. via bus, and Muriel Bowser tried to call in the National Guard twice and was rejected there, so they had some tension there. And then this year, Bowser, in her inaugural address, went out and said that the federal government needs to either send all their employees back to the office, or they need to basically give up all the tremendous office space they hold here in D.C. For affordable housing. She's been on the affordable. I actually used to cover affordable housing before I got here. She's been on the housing kick for a long time. She wants more people to move into D.C., and D.C. is very expensive. She wants it to be more affordable as well. So she kind of paired two different things here. One is that D.C. has not been as busy as her business down here. People are not in downtown as much, not buying as much coffee and having as many lunches and that kind of thing. And then secondly, the issue of having more housing and more subsidized or affordable housing here. She kind of called out Biden on that. I think most federal workers are still working remotely, at least some of the time. I think a lot of them are still working remotely all the time.
Right.
And she's saying, all right, something's got to give. Either you send them back or give up the buildings, let them be used for something else.
Yeah, I mean, it is interesting because, telework has clearly had a major impact on downtown D.C. in particular. Parts of the city that are very dependent on commuters and on tourists and on people coming in from outside. But as you mentioned, Bowser does have this interest in affordable housing, and the federal government has a lot of buildings here in D.C.
Yeah, absolutely. And then of course it gets into this other issue of Biden, which is the pandemic. You know, is it still an emergency? Is it not an emergency? I think if you ask somebody on the street, is it still an emergency? I think most people would say no. But officially, it still is an emergency, because if it's an official emergency, the executive branch, which is Biden, the Biden administration, gets expanded powers. He's continued to extend that emergency and has vowed to veto it if Congress tries to override him. And so that's been kind of an interesting thing. There's this on again, off again thing. Biden said twice in September that the pandemic is over, but he's still continued the emergency. The student loans forgiveness program, they're still trying to get that through. That rests, legally speaking, on the pandemic being an emergency. And this is yet another example. Is it an emergency or is it not? Can your employees come back to the office or can they not? And if they do come back, is it because it's now safe to do so? Or is it just more about kind of a lifestyle or future of work kind of thing where people can work remotely, so they should?
Sure. So somebody who had a very different approach to the pandemic, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, he was sworn in for a second term as governor. Not a declared candidate for president yet. We really don't even fully know what his plans will be in that area, but a lot of people were looking at his inaugural address for signs that maybe he might throw his hat into the ring.
Yeah, DeSantis was sworn into office for his second term. It's probably the most closely watched governor's inaugural speech, at least probably in the state of Florida's history, although they've had a few other former governors run for office. But DeSantis is definitely, his presidential buzz seems to be growing by the week. It was a very closely watched speech that he gave there in Tallahassee. It was a big, packed area. A lot of people were there to watch it, and I'm sure a lot of people tuned in. I certainly did, to watch it online and on TV as well. DeSantis' speech was really, really interesting. Of course, he was talking about what the things he did in Florida and how he accomplished his goals in Florida and what he's going to do going forward for Florida. But if you look at the speech closely, it could be very lightly edited and been a pretty straightforward campaign speech, talking about we delivered. That's one thing you get nominated. Talking about was we deliver. That was the theme.
And he wasn't talking about UPS.
No. He's talking about delivering right on his campaign promises. He talked about Florida is where woke goes to die. He talked about navigating the choppy waters of liberty rather than the calm docks of despotism. I think it was something like that. He had a lot of really campaign-sounding lines in there.
Sure, I mean, those could be presidential inaugural lines.
Well, yeah, exactly, and that's what people, I think, took from it. And it was really interesting, too, to watch that, because that was happening at the same time that Republicans in the House were struggling to elect a speaker. Our own columnist, Byron York, talked about this, that you had kind of a struggle, kind of a power struggle in the House versus Ron DeSantis putting what he termed a kind of a clear vision and leadership that he was putting out there. So a lot of people are excited about DeSantis on the Republican side, and we'll see what he does going forward.
Because that's a big part of DeSantis' message, is that Florida is a model for what Republicans could do nationally, and a lot of Republicans from other states have been moving into Florida, so sort of voting with their feet in favor of that vision. And so it's a sharp contrast with President Biden and the Democrats, and a more subtle contrast with maybe former President Trump, Republicans in the House, sort of seeming maybe a little bit more chaotic in their approach to these things, while DeSantis is delivering, as he says.
Yeah, very much so. He's talking about the things he wants to do, and of course, officially, like you said, he's not a candidate. He has not stated as a candidate. He makes sure he's very careful about basically not mentioning Donald Trump for the most part. But I guess the speculation is what he may do is he's going to stick around as officially only the Florida governor for the legislative session in that state through the end. I think the end of May. He'll be trying to get bills through the Florida legislature, do things there, and kind of build his resume even further. And then if he does announce, he's likely to do so when that's over, which would be kind of at the beginning of the summer.
So the Sunshine State is the best disinfectant?
According to DeSantis, yes.
According to DeSantis. Thank you, Haiston.
All right.
You can read Haiston and the rest of our political team's coverage at washingtonexaminer.com.